I just like to say that I come in peace. I've got lots to say, and I guess time is a little short, so I just want to try and rattle through a few things and try and give us some time for questions at the end. I'm here because I work for an organisation called Tomorrow's Company. We're a business-led think tank. We are essentially concerned with the future of business, what it is that businesses need to do now in order to secure future business success. We believe in the power of business to change the world, so we believe business is a force for good. So the principal reason I'm here as a representative of Tomorrow's Company is because we've just got started on some work called the Tomorrow's Global Leaders Program, which is trying to understand why it is that, despite all the work that's been going on, all the books that have been written, all the research that's been done so far, that our capacity to change the composition of our boardrooms up and down the country and elsewhere continues to remain difficult. So we started a program essentially looking at if we're going to get at the issue of changing the composition of boards, we need to look at the pipeline of talented women coming through the organisation, coming through society. What do we need to do in order to improve that? So what I want to do is I want to say a little bit about that work, a little bit about the context for the kind of future of business, because I think that the two things are connected. The issue of women and business is intimately connected with the future of business. I just want to make that connection. Then, and I want to say a little bit about what we've learned so far, what the implications are, and maybe some conclusions. So let's start. So why were we interested in this issue in the first place? Well, I've already mentioned the intractability of the issue. It seems to be pretty resistant to change. By our calculations, at the current rate of change in terms of boards, it will take about 70 years for us to get where we need to be in terms of reflecting, for the boardroom to reflect wider society. 70 years. At the moment, 97% of men take up all the board positions. I also discovered in looking up some of the statistics that 78% of all newspaper articles are written by men. That's interesting. A number of people have talked a little bit about meritocracy, that business of we just hire the best people. One of the things that we've already discovered in the research is that meritocracy doesn't really work. That there's a big issue around meritocracy about what organisations actually mean. I'm very happy to have that conversation. There's lots of things to say about it. Among some of the issues that I think relate to meritocracy is that it's clear that I think last year 60% of graduates across Europe I think were female. 60% of PhDs were given to women, and yet if you look at the way in which companies recruit, often it's 50% women, 50% men at the entry point. As people grow up through the hierarchy and time progresses through their career, the number of women dissolves away, the number of men increases, and that's how we end up with the organisations that are skewed in the way that they are right now. So one of the reasons why we're interested in it is because it seems an intractable problem. It's a big issue. Come back to the meritocracy point in a second. It's also true that that as well as it being the right thing to do for society, if we want to try and get our organisations to work more effectively, the research also tells us that it makes lots of business sense. So I'm happy to go through the research, but the research tells us that if you've got more women on the board, that organisation is more financially successful. Whether there's a straightforward causal relationship there, we can argue about, but the data is there. Some of the data supports a sense that there's an anti-groupthink thing that goes on in boards, so boards don't tend to think the same. And also there's more critical voices at board level and senior levels in an organisation if there are more women involved. But I think that the research that we've done so far tends to suggest that the key thing that's making a difference in involving more women in organisations is the way that they do leadership. And leadership is absolutely crucial for business success. Now, there's lots to say about this, but I think that the two key things that I want to focus on is that women do leadership differently in the sense that they somehow are more inspiring of their teams. And I think that we've got some interesting examples of women who are inspiring here. And also, I think Roisin already mentioned it, it's something about collaboration. They do collaboration differently. And collaboration, I think, is the key to future business success. Why do I think that? Because of this. This is the context for which all tomorrow's companies' work operates in. We call it the triple context. There's lots to say about this diagram, but essentially, this is the context within which all businesses operate. And it's at the relationship between these big three subsystems, the natural environment, the social and political system, and the global economy. It isn't just about the economy, folks. It's about the relationship between all three of those things. And tomorrow's company have argued now for the last 2 or 3 years that in the context of this triple context, we are moving from an age where we've been dominated by information technology, moving from an age where there was the industrial economy and so on, and we're now moving into what we call the age of sustainability. So the big context for organizational success ahead is this triple context in the wider context of sustainability, the age of sustainability. Again, happy to say more about that. No one's mentioned it so far. We think it's really, really important. Just some brief snapshots in terms of the triple context and the age of sustainability. Climate change, we're at 394 parts per million CO2 in the atmosphere right now. It's going up, despite all our attempts to try and reduce our emissions. That tends to suggest that we're already going to break through the 2-degree global temperature rise, possibly to 4 degrees, possibly beyond. That's really, really scary. So that's the natural environment. In terms of the global economy, we're all struggling now with the problems of globalization. That seems to be going pretty well right now. Not. And in terms of the social and political system, well, there's all sorts of things to say about that. How about the fact that there are 4.5 billion people on the planet that don't have a toilet? So there's a big context here for business success. It's the age of sustainability, things are changing. So in that context, in thinking about the future, and thinking about the relationship between how organizations are constructed and how they work, we believe that there's no more business as usual, that we need a step change in our thinking and our action, and changing the way in which organizations work in terms of their diversity is really, really important to that. So in terms of the future of business, I think there's lots to say again, but I think there's just these three things. The future of business is collaborative, and that's one of the reasons why women and their leadership capacity and the way in which they do things are really, really important. It's much more transparent. The world's changing. Lots of things that used to go on behind closed doors now no longer can do that. Things are much more open, and it's only going to get more and more transparent. And increasingly, what we're seeing in terms of the way in which the business environment is operating right now, reference the Barclays thing, for example, the future of business is much more values-led. It isn't about a single financial bottom line. It's about the sort of organization you are. We think that we're pleased to say that the recent IBM survey of CEOs, of global CEOs, just recently produced, agrees with us. They said that the three things that they were concerned about and that they were focusing their attention on in that survey is ethics, values, and collaboration. So what is it that we're doing in this research? The one that I mentioned earlier, this Tomorrow's Global Leader program. Well, we're connecting lots of leaders with lots of experts, running lots of dialogues and conversations and so on, reading lots of things, trying to find out a little bit about the problem. These are our questions. I don't want to spend too long on this, but just to say that there are three sort of groups: one on organizational culture, one on the whole leadership style issue, and the other on, which a number of people have already mentioned, is why is it that women leave? Why is it that we end up with that, parity at the point of entry, and then as we grow up in an organization, less and less women, more and more men? So what have we learned so far? We've learned that. That's our systems map of the issues. I don't propose to spend any time on that, but just to say that it's complicated. But just to say that one of the things that I do want to mention is that over there on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see there's a box called Building Critical Mass. I'm going to come back to that in a second. So the learning so far in terms of what businesses, companies need to do differently, and this is primarily from reading the literature and so on, and talking to a number of people, but primarily from the literature. Companies, in order to be more successful in attracting, retaining, and developing talent, particularly female talent, need to do these things. They need to measure and report. If organizations are not on the front foot around their measurement and reporting, in the age of transparency, in the age of sustainability, organizations will be forced to do it. Better to be on the front foot and get that right. You also need to know what's going on in your organization. And organisations are often really poor, very good at researching marketplaces, not very good at researching their own internal dynamics. You need to deploy that research capacity well. Lots of people have already talked about it, flexible working, but for real. I mean, there's lots of examples, Machine's already mentioned some of them in P&G, that, where flexible working can really work. I mean, it's not a panacea for everything, but we really need to try harder. And there's a lot of this is where it comes down to a lot of this relates to the problem of meritocracy and the connection between flexible working, hiring the best people, and what is the job, what is the work. We're really clear about some of those first things. We're often not very clear about what the work is, because the work's changing the whole time. So instituting flexible working for real, there's lots of really great examples, and that also means for men too. Men also would like to work flexibly, I think. I certainly do, and enjoy that. Also, a number of people have mentioned that that organisations need to build internal and external support networks for women that they want to see as rising talent in the organisation. But crucially, and this is the key piece, they need to be concerned with leadership development, the development of women leaders in organisations. And someone's already mentioned the fact that one of the things that emerges from the research is that often women are not only not trained in leadership development stuff, but they're also not given the practical support that they need in order to develop as leaders, particularly when it comes to being given business-critical projects to work on. Those tend to go to the men. And so women don't get the work, the experience that they need to develop in order to progress up the organisation and be successful. And that's one of the things that definitely needs to change. Finally then, coming on to coming back to this issue of what do we need to do about it in the round, and thinking about that issue that I mentioned in terms of critical mass. It feels to me, initially from the research, that we've got no choice but to embrace quotas if we're really going to change this system quickly. A number of other countries are already doing that now, some of them very successfully. In Norway, for example, someone was already mentioned, but France and Spain and others are starting to embrace that. The key thing about the research tells us that if an organisation has a critical mass of women, in this case, in an organisation, on a board, it's 50-50, then new norms become present. And all of the issues that women face as a minority in an organisation just dissolve. So the quicker we can get to critical mass, it might not be 50%, but it could be 30 or 40%, the quicker we can get there, the quicker that we can kind of move on from this issue. And so I make no apology for saying that I think that we need to be behind quotas, get some regulatory force behind that, and that will support us making the difference. Unless we do that, in my view, we'll still be talking about this in 70 years' time. And frankly, that would be a disaster for organisations and for society. Thank you very much.